so how we want to focus our energy, how we want to lean into doing one or two things spectacularly. If you are trying to, break into market, compete with bigger players, what that may mean is, you feel imposter syndrome.
Vijay, thank you so much for being on the show. Really excited to have you here. And it's so amazing to see, as I was preparing for today's interview, everything you've done from having your own businesses as a founder to then going and becoming a VC and also coaching in the space. So wonderful to have you here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Katie, for having me on the show.
I'd love to start off with this transformation that you do, where you support entrepreneurs, business owners to go from this founder role to being more of a CEO. Tell us, what are some of the shifts that need to happen in order to go from one role to the other?
It's really difficult to make the shift, and not just because many companies don't get to the stage or the scale to make that jump, but specifically you as an individual have so much of your identity and so much of the responsibilities on your shoulder of this business that you really have to go from being the chief everything officer to being the chief chief executive officer. And that is a real shift in mindset. And it feels like a luxury. It feels really hard. It feels infeasible for you to drop things or to let things go, put them in other people's hands, some of whom may not be able to do it as well as you can. And, that requires establishing a certain kind of culture, building a certain type of team, and then asking yourself, like, how can I build this capability elsewhere in the company before you're ready?
So what are some of the moments, like if we look at it as a transition, like sort of caterpillar to the butterfly, what would
Yeah,
be some of the stages that need to happen?
absolutely. Well, I think the real chrysalis is between chief everything officer and chief executive officer, where you're really, you know, managing a group of leaders, of executives, is there's the chief enablement officer. And the chief enablement officer moment means you spend most of your time not necessarily doing things, not exactly providing governance and oversight and just strategy to others, but figuring out, how do I make this person successful in their role? And it may be that there's a lot of magical startups where you find there are people who are in that role and they know what they want to do and they don't need to be managed, and they're geniuses, and you'll see that described as the ideal, as this platonic state for hiring people who are better and smarter than you and so forth, and that is an ideal. And oftentimes you're trying to find people who have done things you've never had to do before. But even the most talented person who comes into your organization, it is irresponsible to just like drop them in and then say like, okay, great, now you're in charge of customer success, or maybe you're in charge of this part of outbound sales, when in fact you have to create the conditions for them to win and for the company to best use their talents. And that requires just a different gear altogether than if you're directly doing the thing and someone's kind of assisting you, or you're overseeing a group of people and you can delegate in a way that is really deferring to all the people who are there.
I can imagine that a lot of founders don't want to step into this role because they actually enjoy the building a lot more than they enjoy enabling
Mm-hmm.
others. How do you support them if they just really love the building side of the business and don't really want to do so much or as much of the leadership part?
Yeah, there is a natural tendency to want to still build. I think the challenge is going from the builder to feeling more of an architect who can zoom back. And for some people, it means they want to take somebody under their wing and show them how they do things. And that's a way of nurturing that talent and creating that function. For others, it is saying, I'm responsible for the product roadmap. I'm responsible for where things are going, and I still don't relinquish that responsibility. But I take very seriously that there are parts of this that have to be done well, and maybe I have blind spots, or there are people who can help me. So it requires a lot of evaluation, introspection. Nobody walks around or even wakes up one day and says like, "Oh yeah, you know what? We really haven't figured out the top of the funnel sort of awareness piece, and therefore this is the type of role we need and the kind of person we want." It's always an evolution. It's never a day when we realize, oh yeah, we've gone from chapter 2 to chapter 3 of our story. Now this is when we do X. Usually there are places where things break, people sort of stumble and fall, and that is, where from pain there's growth.
Yes, and that leads to my next point, which was around how do you support founders that are going through the challenges that come with growth and uncertainty? It's exactly what you talk about now.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty, and I start by explaining the difference between uncertainty and risk. And in financial markets, risk is a probabilistic outcome that we can try and quantify, and we can imagine, what the degree and likelihood of something. And uncertainty is when we are operating in such a low information environment, but we expect there to be some changes, and we just don't have enough probabilistic data, enough statistical intuition, even in terms of what would happen and how. And so the first part comes with acceptance of that reality, and the second part is a understanding that there are some things we get to control and there are others we don't. And then of the things we get to control, consider how do those things either impact or not impact whatever it is we're optimizing for. So if you're trying to optimize for user growth on your app, if you're trying to optimize for the fastest foundation model, if you're trying to build a program that adds the most franchisees to your scaling business, then what is the bottleneck? What's holding us back, and how do we break that bottleneck? So you might be doing that. That's actually easier than optimizing something. In a large organization, you usually go around trying to optimize things and say, okay, well, we'll make this like 2% bigger, or we'll adjust something else by just a tweak. And in fact, that doesn't seem to be the case for startups, because you're still evolving and growing. And so since you're not in optimization mode, you just go around saying, what's slowing us down, what's breaking, and how do I adjust that? And that allows you to focus on things you can control, get to a place where you are influencing to the greatest degree possible that whatever aspect it is that seems to be slowing down whatever it is that you want to achieve when it comes to your real optimization, or not optimization, sorry, your real critical outcome.
That's great to hear, because that's exactly the process I followed in my own business, really looking not only at the zone of influence of what I focus on, but really looking at the roadblocks, like what's holding me back, what's slowing down the growth, and equally looking at the past success and learning from that, and seeing what were some of the actions I took then, and using this to accelerate whatever I was trying to build or grow, being like, okay, all of these things worked well. So for instance, a lot of my clients came from workshops or speaking engagements. So then how about I focus on doing more workshops and speaking engagements instead of trying to build an Instagram or TikTok account, for example?
That's a great point. You're more likely to have success doubling down on something that's delivering results than trying to either copy paste someone else's playbook or run a whole bunch of random side experiments.
Yes, I've also done that too. Tried to have all the side experiments and learn from them. But I realized that, of course, you learn from failure, But we really also learn quite a lot from success, what's worked well, especially if we've been in business more than 3 or 5 years. Now it's been 7, 8 years. Then we have some data that shows, hey, this stuff worked out most. How about we do more of this?
So in that respect, when you think about what this data can tell you and where the data will point, what's your North Star for the business?
I mean, right now or in general? Or...
No, in general, right.
I mean, in general would be to impact as many people as possible. And generally that's through coaching, training, speaking, the podcast.
Exactly. So you're focusing on reach, on the impact on as many people as possible. And it's really good to remember that, because sometimes we go through the motions of, oh, we did this, we launched this new product, and it's like, did that matter? Was that the right use of our energy? We all get 24 hours in a day. I like to remind my coaching clients and founders I've invested in. So whether you or Leonardo da Vinci or Marie Curie or someone else who has impacted the world, likes to think that their time is infinite. It's really not. We all get 24 hours in a day. So how we want to focus our energy, how we want to lean into doing one or two things spectacularly is, again, where we're deciding to break a bottleneck or take something that's working and continue winning there. And if it's in the service or in the direction of our bigger mission or North Star, then that's where we know we're pointed in the right direction.
Yes, what I'm thinking right now is for the founders that are really early stage and they're the chief of everything and doing everything, how can they optimize then their time and energy? Because there's so many different roles, from being clear on the product market fit to getting the funds to maybe building their first teams. How do you support those founders in those very early stage to manage all the different roles?
If you took a deductive approach to building a business, you would have capital, and then you'd have a team, and then they would build the world's greatest product, and then you would have customers. You actually end up flipping that entire script upside down, and not exactly in this order, but you have to identify a potential customer, and maybe this is based on past experience or some intuition, and you have to run a bunch of tests, validate that customer, and then once you have validated and done a bunch of customer discovery and customer development, maybe then you are beginning to build something more refined and is like a first version of the product for them, and that could be you. It could be you and a co-founder. The team starts to emerge, and maybe it's people who would be willing to join the project. It could be advisors, it could be others, and then the capital comes when there is traction and there's an amazing team or a couple tremendous co-founders to bet on. And this is very hard to imagine, because I see so many people without working product yet saying, "Oh, I just need $1 million or $2 million, and then this is gonna be great. This is gonna go work." And today, particularly given the rapidly decelerating cost to build or at least start a business, it might be expensive to scale one. It is possible now for us to see that you might really start with an hypothesis, validate it, and then get the capital much later.
Yeah, so there is kind of a linear approach, and trying to do everything at once sort of distracts from this more linear sequence in terms of growing the business.
Yes, and particularly on the fundraising side, I think there's this this desire to have your equivalent of a great headline, a great TechCrunch article or something like that says Katie's app, Katie's new B2B SaaS business, whatever, has just raised all this money, because that's the thing we can track. Like sometimes it takes many years to get to an exit. Sometimes you may go a long time before having some success. So people see and they look as a metric of success as how much money they've raised. And therefore, what do some founders do? They spend a lot of time networking and trying to meet investors and trying to pitch people when they don't have a lot of great progress yet. And so the alternative to that is to take a very process-oriented approach to fundraising, signaling to people, I'm not raising now, but this is what we're working on, and asking them a lot of questions, as opposed to kind of put yourself on a platform and get attention. So I take this approach very seriously, and it's something that worked with many of the founders in the portfolio of my prior firm. And that's what went into this book, the funding framework, is that there is a process that you can run in 8 to 12 weeks to get the funding you need from investors, be they angels or VCs, that creates the right momentum, because that's what you need, not just for showing that your business is working, but that you can fundraise in a very high throughput way.
Mm-hmm. It's great to see that it all comes down to strategic clarity or clear strategy. If we put the words the other way around, having this clear strategic approach to funding, to growing and scaling the company, to shifting from founder to CEO.
That's right, and that's the thing. You have a finite amount of hours, as you were saying. You have a certain kind of energy that maybe comes from building the product, or maybe it comes from selling and meeting your customers, whatever it is. Harness that energy and direct what energy you do have into the thing that's highest leverage, highest output in the service of your mission.
It makes total sense on paper, but I think what happens is when people begin, unless they have that support or mentor or coach or people who have that experience, it's easy to suddenly think they need to do everything and just get caught up and frustrated and confused about all the different things they need to do.
Yeah, there's the famous Mike Tyson, the boxer, saying that everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Everybody has a plan what they're going to do this morning until they open their inbox, and something happens, something's broken. There's a headline of some kind that shakes your assumptions or throws you off course, right? This is all easy to say, hard to do, but the good news is you can always take that step back and ask yourself, what do I get to control today?
Yes.
And how do I want to distribute my energy in service of influencing that?
Yes, it all comes back to focusing on what we can actually influence. So I'm curious, because you've worked with so many different founders, you've supported them, you've coached them, you've also, an investor. What are some of the traits, the inner traits? So not externally how good of a product market fit it is or all these things. What were some of the inner traits you've seen with the founders who were successful in the long run, whose business kept going, versus the founders who had a business and maybe didn't work out after even a year or 2 years? So if you were to sort of look at some of the core patterns, what would you say differentiate the ones who were more successful or at least had a longer lasting business?
So what are some of the traits that separate those that were able to continue or successful from those that didn't work out? I think there are a couple of things that come to mind. The first is really high quality communication in their team. The second is customer centricity, and actually there's a third. The third is around setting very, very high standards for themselves and for the people that they work with, and which influences hiring, influences how they roll out the product, and all kinds of things like that. So those are the three things. and the communication is a really important one, because it's something we noticed, is like when you run an accelerator program, you do it enough times, you get to see that around 6 weeks in, you know which companies are going to be a hit on demo day and which are not. And the biggest tell is how are not just like the momentum they report week to week, but how are the teams talking to themselves. And if people are in an environment of really high quality communication, then what you see is that they're sharing things, they're taking feedback in a particular way, they help each other, they have very high intention for one another. You don't have a situation where one person just wants to build in isolation and not talk to the other person all day, where somebody cuts somebody else off when they're talking, when there's this sort of dysfunction that's growing, and it's because they don't agree on direction, they're misaligned, there's an environment of low trust. And so that's the communication part. There's research from Harvard Business School that suggests that team or particularly co-founder misalignment is responsible for 65% of startup failure. Because we look at the sort of the symptoms, but not the cause. We say, oh well, this company was low on money or low on cash. They didn't break into the market. The timing was wrong, and these are all like important. But I think the quality communication is big there. The second thing that I was talking about customer centricity is super important, because sometimes people have their own idea of what the market needs and so forth, but they don't listen. And I've been guilty of this myself in my first startup, in terms of how you need to pivot and be responsive. I mean, you need to have your own vision, and you need to have a clear idea of what you want, but ultimately the market wins. And so you don't want to be too early, too late, or focusing on the wrong segment. And so that's why it's super important to be market-centric. And then the third part, in terms of, which is a cultural thing, is certainly around the standards that I talked about. So when the standard you walk by is a standard you accept. And so there are some people who have confided their difficulty in terms of, I didn't like this or like that, or this, I'm struggling. How do I give the feedback to this person I don't like, what this looks like. Sometimes you need to have a culture document. Sometimes you need to have a manifesto. Sometimes you need to commit the values, and maybe one of them is like the quality of the work you do. Maybe it is that we're hiring people who are as good or better than the last person we hired. One version of this for the vertical AI venture studio that I work with, GI Ventures, where I'm a partner, and which is really important, is we want the next founder that we decide to incubate a business with to be better than the last one that we worked with. And so as good or better. And that means we have to hold ourselves to a really high standard in terms of the quality of what they can do, the pace at which they work, the energy that they bring, and do we think we're going to be compatible and highly successful collaborating with them. And that's really hard, because it's easy and it feels easy to let those standards slide, but those easy way out create like difficult outcomes and difficult conditions later. And it's very hard to rewind the tape.
I love this idea of raising your standards, because I think it's so easy to become complacent, especially if you have something that's working or that's quite good or could work, and to just sort of settle. And I think constantly improving your game is more satisfying.
Yeah. Like, what does that mean? It means maybe quite literally, you as a CEO are going to have to approve the first 200 hires in the company. Like, you are going to need to make sure that is your responsibility. The culture, the people. It means in the first 20 hires, certain rituals, practices, norms get baked in, and that becomes culture. As much as you want to declare a new strategy or mission or metric or goal, it's going to come down to like how people work and what they do. And so the people look very carefully for incentives, and they understand your standard, and they and therefore it's on you as that founder, that CEO, that leader to say that this is what it's going to be, and ask people to do the best work of their lives.
Absolutely. And one of the things struck me when you were talking about communication between the teams and building that high trust, I was thinking this is also internal communication for the founder and CEO, how they speak to themselves. Do they build up that self-belief and self-trust within themselves? Because even if there's a good communication between the team members, if internally the founder is filled with self-doubt or struggles with imposter syndrome or is constantly like mean or overly critical to themselves or has a really fixed mindset, this will slow down the growth a lot.
Absolutely. And because all the things that come when you're doing the right things feel uncomfortable or sometimes wrong. So you get more pressure, you get more responsibility. The reward for great work or great progress in your business will be more of that work, and that includes you, not just like your team, right? So as you progress, then that starts to feel overwhelming, and as you get to the next stage, and you're, let's say, raising money, and you're hearing a lot of no's. You may feel absolutely rotten if you are trying to, break into market, compete with bigger players. What that may mean is, you feel imposter syndrome. I tell my coaching clients two things about imposter syndrome. One, if you don't have imposter syndrome, you're probably you're probably then extremely narcissistic. And so it's a good thing to have imposter syndrome. It's actually a sign of mental health, not the other way around, according to research from Arthur Brooks at Harvard. And then the second thing about imposter syndrome is it's a sign of your growth, that you are in the right room, that there are people who are more accomplished, who might be more intelligent, who might have better, fancier, more expensive degrees, whatever the case is. It's a sign of your growth, that you are playing a bigger game, that you have gone to a bigger or major league of this game, and that is really exciting. So it is intimidating, but that's a sign of your progress in the world.
Do you deal with this a lot? Do you find this a lot with founders?
I don't know a lot of people who don't have this. I think how much people verbalize really depends one person to the next, but I think it's very natural. I think the imposter syndrome versus just like overwhelm pendulum swings very quickly sometimes. And so before people can sit with it and contemplate, we're succeeding, but now I feel like imposter, something else happens, and they go back to okay, how do I wrestle with this new challenge?
I have this theory around overwhelm and imposter syndrome, which is that the over hustle is a way of compensating and trying to appear more confident. So if they're always busy and always hustling and super overwhelmed, it makes them look more successful, even though the business could be also more successful. But it's a way of masking the inadequacy they might feel in that situation.
Yes, that's important insight. I really love that. Yeah, that you can be hustling as a way to feel better.
Yeah, feel better. Of course, we also hustle because we want the business to succeed and we're passionate and all of these different aspects. But I think sometimes that is an underlying cause.
Right. But perhaps we don't realize by trying to show up and impress people and act a certain way, we don't look the part at all.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very hard. Yeah, and knowing and liking who we are, and recognizing, everyone is at a different place in this journey is really important, I think. And that's the acceptance part. That's the what do I control part. That's the idea that there is more to do always, and then there's just what matters today, and that's all we can compartmentalize and think about. When we zoom out and are left alone too long with our thoughts, we can spiral if we're not in starting from a healthy place.
Yes, absolutely. And it's all about managing that internal world, but also the external world and the actual strategy in place. Okay, we're coming up to the last few minutes. What's one topic that we haven't covered that you think would be important to mention in today's episode?
So we've talked about that journey from chief everything officer to chief executive officer, and in the middle there's something called chief enablement officer, where you're trying to set other people up for success. And I think this is one of the things that is often done very badly, because people have heard of delegation, and that means they assume, okay, Katie, I want you to do this, and then they leave the room. Right? And there's actually different levels of delegation, which there's a lot of literature on. So the first is heavy on direction. The second is heavy on the decision. The third is a form of delegation and follow up. And then the fourth one is about how to defer. And in all of those, when you are enabling people, it's your job to tell them what you're going to do, as well as not going to do, and then what the outcome should look like. So in the direction part, it's like, well, I've decided we are going to decide on this, and so I want you to do A, B, and C. As opposed to the decision, which is, I want you to figure out what to do about X, and then bring it to me, and I'll make the decision. So I own the decision. As opposed to delegating with follow-up, which is, here's what needs to be taken care of. I want you to do all the research and make the decision, and just keep me posted on what's happening, and make sure you let me know, what's evolving and how things turn out. As opposed to deferring, which is, there's this thing I know and trust you based on your level of competence and our experience working together. Take care of it, and let me know. Don't let me know later about how it turned out. Not being really specific, and I take an extra 2 minutes to articulate that, is where people's expectations get missed, where people on your team are frustrated, and where you begin to lose trust in the consistency or competence of the people around you. It's your fault. Like, you need to do that well and be in the practice and habit of doing it well. And ask yourself, wait, did I give this person A, enough information, and B, communicate expectations, outcome, and what I do and do not expect to do, report this at the time.
Very nice. Yes, so important. This is such a key aspect to take into account when you shift from chief everything officer to chief executive officer, or even that role in between with the chief enablement officer.
It even shows up in funding. So the funding framework consists of 4 parts. So and it's on the diagram on the front of the book. So there's storytelling, there's organization, there's outreach, and then there's closing. And the closing part isn't just on you. You're responsible for closing your round, as opposed to your lawyers and investors. But you have to enroll your team, and that requires project managing, not just saying like, hey, check the bank account today, but this is how we're going to break this down, and everyone has a role, and here's what I'm going to do versus someone else. So it shows up in all kinds of things, not just in what is your job description or mine.
Absolutely. Vijay, thank you so much. Thank you for joining today. I loved our conversation. So many key insights. My mind is still processing half of the conversation. Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Katie.